Hey everyone, I'm Chance, co-founder at Galen AI. At Galen AI, we specialize in AI applications for small businesses, especially voice agent solutions, which basically take calls and make calls for you, saving you lots of time and lots of money and lots of labor. So with me today is my co-founder, Vignesh, as well as our engineering manager, Matthew. So yeah, with that being said, why don't you two introduce yourselves and then we can get started.
Yeah, that sounds good. So again, my name is Vignesh. A little background about myself. Me and Chance actually went to the same high school together. I met him when I was like 15 or 16, and since then we've stayed friends, but we've gone off in like two separate pathways. So I went into pharmacy after undergrad. So I'm currently a pharmacist, and then Chance, went into big tech and more of the software aspect. So coming together, we realized that we're experts in different areas, or I would say like beginning off to be very competent in those areas, and wanted to see if there's a way to combine both of our skill sets. So with the rotations that I've done in pharmacy school and just the background knowledge that I had, I thought that there was certain processes within a pharmacy that could be automated or just that the workflow could it be improved upon. And with Chance's background is more so the applications of AI, we began reaching out to pharmacies and just trying to understand what problems that they had that we can try and automate and see like if there was an actual need for this type of. And with that, if you guys go back to some of our older YouTube videos, you can see that we created an inbound caller to start off with. So whenever a patient would call into the pharmacy and wanted information, let's say on whether it could take out a prescription refill or it was to figure out if their prescription was ready or schedule a vaccine appointment, this bot would automatically be able to answer those questions and then also put a slot on the calendar if they schedule an appointment where the pharmacist could see, okay, hey, I have a patient coming in at this time and they want a vaccine for, let's say, the flu or the COVID-19 vaccine. And with that application, we started to see that there was like a widespread use of this type of inbound caller. So we then looked into other niches like urgent cares, as well as private practices like dermatologists or dental practices to see if there could be a similar type of application. In addition to that, we've also developed on like outbound callers. So that's more so helping out individuals directly linked into sales. So whether that's like real estate agents, insurance agents, who may benefit from having a system that can automatically vet their potential clients and see if they would like to establish a relationship in that way. And with that, that's kind of what we're working on altogether, really exploring these different niches, trying to understand what are the problems that we can address. And that's where Matt and Chance can really pull their expertise together to see, whether this is doable.
So, yeah, as Chance said, I'm Matthew. I'm the engineering manager at Galen AI. I am a recent graduate from the University of Maryland, where I majored in computer science and have minors in statistics and business. Throughout my entire collegiate career, I spent a lot of my time, both academically and with personal projects, focusing on AI. So my freshman and sophomore year, I was a part of a program that taught the basics of machine learning. I built a model that colorized black and white images, and that's more traditional AI. But around when I graduated from that program is when ChatGPT first came out, and I started to get really interested in LLMs and all of the different use cases that you could use LLMs for. So from then on, I spent almost all of my personal projects and most of my free time working on projects that used LLMs for unique use cases. A few examples of personal projects that I've built are I built a ChatGPT plugin that used vector embeddings, which pretty much lets you search for text among a database, but not based off of exactly what words there are, but the general meaning of the text. So I built a tool that let you search for research papers in ChatGPT to help you find research papers related to a specific query, which helped a lot of academics with their paper reviews. Another project that I built recently was called Wiki2Vid, where I fed in an entire Wikipedia page's content and had an AI create a script for an educational video and then narrate the script and automatically add images and videos and pretty much put together a complete educational video automatically. And currently, I'm working for a due diligence law firm and helping use AI to automate some of their processes and improve the processes. So they do a lot of document review, so helping them to ask questions about documents or find information in documents much faster. And in general, also like providing a second check on the attorney's works. So they do the work first, and then we use AI to make sure that there's nothing that was missed. And I think that's a really good use case for LLMs. And just a few months ago, I started working for Galen AI. I actually met Chance because he DM'd me on LinkedIn. He was a recruiter at the time, and he was trying to recruit me for one of his recruiter positions. We ended up talking about this Galen AI that he was starting up, and it was a really good fit. So I started working for them a few months ago. And since then, I've had a really good time working on a lot of products that add value to our clients' workflows and save them money and time. And I've really enjoyed working on those projects with the other developers that we have on our team.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt, for sharing your experience and some context. And yeah, thanks, Vignesh, for sharing some of the story behind Galen AI. It's funny. So I started off in college as a data science major at Berkeley, and I'm now a product manager in big tech, where I've been there for the last 2 years. And, the reason why I started this with Vignesh was because we saw this gap that, AI is exploding, right? But all of the tools that were being developed by these fancy startups were kind of targeting big business instead of focusing on maybe smaller scale but higher impact applications that could be used in small businesses like due diligence or like the medical field or pharmacy, right? Today's conversation is mainly about, not only you getting a chance to know us and the team at Galen AI, but also a chance for you to learn some stuff about AI, particularly what sets LLM AI apart from any tech before and how it can help your business, and maybe a little bit about how it works. So with that being said, let's jump into it. Matt, question for you. What makes large language model AI so unique and different from other technologies, other automation technologies, and traditional AI? And why is it a game changer in terms of automation?
Yeah, so I think that LLMs are really a game changer because it's the first AI that's really truly general purpose. Like I'm sure every one of you watching the video has used ChatGPT before, and you can ask it almost any question and it's able to understand what you're asking and give a succinct response to your question. So other types of automation, like in terms of non-AI automation, you would have to custom build these solutions with whatever your workflow is, and it doesn't have the natural language understanding that LLMs do. So, for example, we are working on phone bots, like voice agents. With prior automation tools, you would have to have the end user enter in the number of the option that they want to select, because it wasn't able to understand if you were just talking to it what you were saying or what you were asking for. But LLMs allow it to understand what the customer is asking for, and it doesn't have to be a binary multiple choice response. It can understand any query and understand what it needs to look for to answer that query. And in terms of other forms of AI, a lot of forms of AI have to be custom built to your application. So for example, for like a credit fund, or someone who's wanting to determine creditworthiness of a bank, you have to build these models with proprietary data. And then that model, once you're done with it, only works for that one use case. It's not like you can just train a model and ask it to do any number of things, but that's what LLMs can do. It understands the English language or any language and is able to do any wide variety of tasks. It's really, I've never seen a technology so general purpose.
Yeah, and I will add to that the aspect of just clicking a number on this phone whenever you call it. So that's like an IVR system, and a lot of like pharmacies have that sort of application. And even if you call your insurance company, they'll use the same type of system. And generally, when a customer is calling in, they might feel like less engagement with that type of system. And even when I call the insurance, I want to talk to the person immediately, right? So it's just that when you use LLMs, it kind of helps enhance that experience the patient or customer is going through, where it makes them more likely to actually go through some of the prompts and get to the solution that they're working for.
Yeah. So what you guys have said brings me to another question. You guys both mentioned that a very strong point of LLM AI applications is that it has that semantic understanding and that it excels in language-based communication tasks. So could you expand on that a little bit and kind of explain what tasks LLMs specifically, LLM AIs are specifically suited to automate?
Yes. So LLM stands for large language model, and really at its core, it's just a next word predictor. So it can look at the text that you've put in and tell you what it thinks the next word is. And you would think that something like that wouldn't have as much language understanding as it does. But by building it to predict the next word, it kind of builds what we call a world model, where it can understand not just what the language means, but what the relation between all of these words are. It understands a language in a way that much like me or you do. So I think in terms of what applications LLMs are really suited for, any applications that involve natural language. To go back to the example, like if you're predicting credit worthiness, LLMs are not going to do that because that's not a language-based task. LLMs are just for the language-based tasks. So if you have a question and you have a bunch of text and you want an answer based off of that. So like in my other job where I'm working for the due diligence company, a lot of their work revolves around understanding language from these long documents that have information. And that's something that LLMs really excels at. It's able to understand what all of the information in the document is. And if you ask a question about the document, it's able to go through and understand what relates to that question and what's important. So, another distinction that I want to make is that LLMs are not that great at reasoning currently. They are able to get from point A to point B, but if there's a bunch of A to B to C to D in between, LLMs are not really that great at that. So, if you can give it a not open-ended question, like take this text, for example, for the phone bots, like take this user input and decide what the next option is. It will be able to understand what the next option is. But if you ask it a question about like going back to the due diligence, if you just ask it like, what are all of the material findings in this report, it might not be able to determine what is material, what's important, what's not in the report. Like the more steps there are and the less defined instructions there are, the more LLMs will struggle. So it's really great for any monotonous task where, like, if a human phone agent is picking up the phone and they're just listening for what the person's asking for and they're following a script pretty much. LLMs are able to do that. But if there needs to be some reasoning in there, that is where it struggles more.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Is there any way to make LLM AI applications a bit better at, say, getting from A to B to C to D?
Yeah, well, you can explicitly ask it to think one step at a time. For the Wiki2Vid thing that I was writing, I wouldn't just feed it the whole article and ask it to write the script in one step. I would ask it first, give some ideas for the video topic and like how you want to frame the video. And then from that, I would have it pick the best topic. And then from that, it would write the outline for the video. And then from the outline for the video, it would write the whole script. So you can kind of define what the steps it should take are, and that helps it reason through more like what your guidelines are and what you want to accomplish. Versus if you just fed it the article and told it to write a script, it would only have one chance to do that. It may not give the most optimal results. It might just kind of reiterate the whole article without necessarily giving a hook or a conclusion or those types of things.
Got it. So splitting a task up into discrete pieces and then maybe feeding the results of each kind of cycle back into the model might help it tackle more complex.
I will add on to that. And that's kind of like some of the learnings that we've had looking at prompt engineering courses. How do we break it down so we give the model some context? Like what are the objectives that it's trying to achieve? What are the tasks? And That way, and we've seen how long these prompt engineering templates or how much effort we should put into it, because it's like, if you just ask it a basic question, it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? So you want to give it as much information as possible so that, and also be concise at the same time. So the output is something that you would actually want. We actually integrate the prompt engineering that we do into our voice bots and the inbound callers and outbound callers that we're developing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Vignesh brings up a really unique point about LLM AIs specifically. Prompt engineering is a pretty new thing, and it's kind of a way where you use plain language to tell an LLM AI exactly what to do, how to approach the task at hand, and what expected outputs are. So to that end, Matt, could you maybe expand a little further on exactly what prompt engineering is and how it's different from how, you know, AI and other stuff in general has previously works, or how you give other stuff instructions?
Yeah, so prompt engineering is how you tell the large language model what you want it to do. So the less detail you have in your prompt, the more open-ended it is, the more wide range of responses the LLM could give. So prompt engineering is the skill of writing prompts to make the LLM give as close of an answer to your goal as possible. So a few like broad tips for prompt engineering that I can give off the top of my head would be to give examples. So if you can give examples for what the output should look like, it will have a better understanding of what your goal is. The only thing is, I would say be careful of giving your examples, because it will try to replicate the example. So if you have bad examples, it will replicate those bad examples. You want to make sure that you have a wide range of examples of all different types of outputs. It can still be very helpful to give examples. That's the biggest tip that I would give. Another tip is to give as much context as possible. So if you're asking it a question about a specific company or a specific entity, it may have some cursory information in its world model, like some understanding of what that company is. But if you go in and give it as much information as possible, as much context as possible, that will improve its answer a lot. And that's actually like one of the biggest advancements right now in large language models is not in the improving the models themselves, but in something called retrieval augmented generation, where before you prompt the AI, you have it go out to the internet or go out to your database and search for relevant content to your prompt, and then it will inject that context into the prompt to give it as much information as possible. And that really expands the use cases that AI can accomplish, because you can feed it context about your business or internal information or anything. And using retrieval augmented generation broadly expands the capabilities from just general stuff available on the internet to anything that you can feed it context about.
Okay, that's very interesting. So if you were to ask a question about ChatGPT, it isn't dynamically searching the web every time for context and answers. It just uses whatever it's been trained on previously to do so. Is that an accurate way to put it?
Yeah, exactly. So it has whatever its billions of weights in its model, which is kind of an abstract concept, but all of the knowledge inside of the model is stationary. It doesn't change. So if you ask it for information after the model is trained, it won't have knowledge for after the model is trained. It just gets, the model is trained on however many websites that the model makers get at the time. But if you want to add any other information that's not in that content that they train the model with, you have to inject it separately. So and other providers have like internal tools, or on ChatGPT, you can ask it to browse the web and it will browse the web. But that is them implementing retrieval augmented generation RAG into their product. That's not like the model itself is able to search the internet. They're building up the tools to have RAG in their product.
Gotcha. Okay.
100%. If my understanding is correct, that's like similar to like the knowledge bases, right? Some of these no-code tools, they'll have knowledge bases that we can like input information to. So that would be like an example of like something that's stationary that the LLM is pulling from.
Yeah. So when these services have knowledge bases, they're having some form of RAG in their product. You put in the knowledge base, they have some form that determines what information is relevant to the current prompt, and it will give that information to the AI.
Yeah. And just to give some context to the viewer, so for example, if I'm talking about a pharmacy, we can have a knowledge base of all the medication counseling points that you want to discuss. So let's say a patient has a question about acetaminophen, then the LLM will pull from that knowledge base and answer that query. So they could ask, oh, I've had some side effects with acetaminophen. Is nausea normal? And then the LLM is going to pull that from the knowledge base and say, yeah, that might be normal on high doses. So it has the capability to do that. In addition, you can store the services that are offered. So it could be vaccine services, and it can change based on whatever business that you're running. So there's a lot of flexibility in the information that can be stored.
Yeah. So guys, we've talked so far about, what LLMs are good for, what sets them apart from other technologies and more traditional AI, and a little bit of how it works with some intricacies there. I kind of want to pivot. I know that we've discussed this a bit already, but this is a question for Matthew. What should you not automate with LLMs? And, in big tech, we get a lot of training these days on LLMs and, what they're good for and bad for. And something that really keeps coming up is, well, I guess it's two things. One is that LLM AI is fundamentally non-deterministic, and two is the risk of hallucinations. So if you could expand on what you shouldn't do with LLMs and those two aspects of LLMs, maybe more negative aspects of LLMs.
Yeah. So I would say that the biggest thing that you shouldn't automate with LLMs, or anything that requires a lot of reasoning, LLMs could struggle more at, but also anything that requires a high level of accuracy. For the due diligence company that I'm working for, they're not using their AI solutions as replacing the employees. They're using it as a second check. They don't want to have the AI make a mistake and then have that mistake make it all the way to the end. They're just using it to make sure that their employees didn't miss anything. LLMs are always getting better. Like, the rate of improvement in LLMs is crazy, but they still hallucinate, they still miss information. The more complex, the higher the risk of hallucination. The less context, the more risk of hallucination. So to anything complex, anything where accuracy is needed are two detractors.
Got you. But I guess for more simple tasks and straightforward tasks, is there virtually not too meaningful of a risk of hallucinations and, just weird random answers?
Yeah, so the more context that you give, so like for example with RAG, the more context you give, the less the risk of hallucination. And even though like hallucination may technically always be possible, like if you ask ChatGPT what's 2 plus 2, it will say 4 every time. Maybe like 0.00001% of times it won't say 4. Like I don't even know if it's that. So it's not always going to hallucinate. It's just the more complex the task, the more jumps it has to take, the more reasoning, the less context provided. These are all things that can make hallucinations more likely. So yeah, the more context you add with RAG or any other technique will greatly reduce the risk of hallucination and can solve a lot of these problems.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I guess my next question, to kind of sum up what we've been talking about so far, is generally what is possible with LLMs and what should you do with them at a very high level?
Yeah, so that's very broad, but I think anything that involves natural language is automatable by LLMs at like the most broad level. In order to reduce the risk of hallucinations, the more monotonous or the less complex a task is, the more ripe it is for LLM automation. So like customer service agent, where there's a script that the agents are following pretty much. That's something that LLMs are already starting to take over. The more skill-based the task is, the less likely LLMs are to take it over.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So for any of you who are tech workers who want to keep your jobs, better become knowledgeable and get some more practice and learn how to use these tools in your everyday work to make yourself more efficient.
Okay, Matt. So something I wanted more, I guess, clarification on, and just like wanted to know more about is, you mentioned some of the projects that you've like worked on in the past. Would you mind like walking us through it and maybe what you actually used to build these things?
Yeah. So Python is really the language of AI and machine learning. So I would say almost, or literally everything that I've built has been built in Python. So there's a number of libraries and tools out there that abstract away some of this stuff. But at a high level, you don't build your own large language models. You use large language models that are built by these huge tech companies because they're so expensive to train. So these companies spend all this money training the models, and then you just pay to use their API per token. All of these tools are just different ways of using the APIs in more and more abstract ways. OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and Grok and all of these providers have their own Python libraries that you can use. And then there are also tools that kind of group all of that stuff together and add other concepts. So like LangChain is a tool that you can use that lets you build chains of prompts and use any provider. And it adds other concepts like you can add RAG, or it makes summarization easier, or all of these different things. A tool that I just started recently using is called ELL. It's the simplest AI library that I've seen. It makes using AI and writing the code much simpler than LangChain. It might not be necessarily capable of as much, but for simple tasks, like if you're just trying to ask questions and use the API, I think that that's the simplest way to do it. In terms of retrieval augmented generation, there's what are called vector databases, where it lets you, as I was talking about earlier with the ChatGPT plugin that I made that lets you search for research articles, it lets you put all of your text into a database and then search for text in the database, not based off of keyword matching or anything like that, but how semantically similar two pieces of text are. So there's a lot of tools out there that let you do that. I like using Zilla's, which is like an open source provider, but there's a lot of providers out there that are working on vector databases. It's really a burgeoning field.
Yeah, so just a follow-up question. So you mentioned like the different models like ChatGPT, Google, what else, like Anthropic, right? So what are there major differences between them in terms of their functioning? Were they all kind of trained in the same way? What are the major benefits of using one over the other, or is there any?
Yeah, so it's a lot of personal preference. Like there are maybe some broad differences in like different use cases. So I would say Anthropic is much more like fact-based and formal, whereas OpenAI can be more creative and is better at the creativity aspect. But another thing that I would say is that the whatever model's on top changes with every release. Whenever a new provider releases their new model, it's pretty much always the leading model. So what models you want to use change all of the time, and the the infrastructure or the architecture of these models doesn't really change much. And when they do, the other providers aren't far behind. So like OpenAI just recently released a model called O1 that has like reasoning capabilities where the AI is able to take some time before it responds to you and kind of think internally and give it more chance to reason. So that's something unique that OpenAI offers right now. But I would bet that within the coming months, if not sooner, every provider will have something similar. So it kind of changes all the time, and it's an ever-changing landscape.
Yeah, it looks like they're also very tailored to different needs and I guess like the complexity of what people are looking for. So that's
Yeah. And to add on, another distinction that these models have is that uh, they allow you to input different lengths of text. So Google, even though their models aren't really regarded as some of the best, they allow you to input the most context out of every model. It's measured in tokens, where people say that tokens is about three-fourths of a word on average. Google's models let you put in up to 2 million tokens, whereas other providers maybe 500,000 or 200,000, depending on the model.
that's pretty interesting.
I actually did have one last question. So, Matt, very quickly, why are voice agents a good application of LLMs?
Yeah. So, like I was explaining earlier, the current solutions that pretty much every business uses is press one for this, press two for this. And I know that I get frustrated with those systems. And it's like, I just want to refill a prescription. I just want to do that. But they make you go through all of these different menus, and it's always not clear like what menu you should go into for what you're looking for. Whereas LLMs inherently have an understanding of what the user is asking for. So you don't have to provide all of these binary options and make them go through all of these different menus to find what they're looking for. You can just ask, what do you want? And give it a list of different options. The AI can choose what option from. Even if you have 1,000 different options for things that a customer could ask for, it will be able to find the one that they're asking for without having to make them navigate through all of these menus. And it also allows for nuance. Like if someone has a question, a follow-up question, the old systems wouldn't let you ask follow-up questions, but LLMs allow you to do that.
Dang. Thank you for that answer. That's very interesting. I want to thank you, Matthew, for answering all our questions and teaching everyone a bit about AI. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Peace.
Yep. It was great talking with y'all.